Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be here. I, like everyone else, discovered Class Clown when I was around 11 years old, and until my friends found it, I was the funniest kid. When I first heard him, he got me with 2 words: cheese tits. Cheese. Who would have thought to put those 2 words together? The man was clearly a genius. And I didn't realize till many years later that everything else that I was hearing on that album had another level of value. That was the brilliance to me of what George could bring. He would reel in 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds, great phrases like cheese. I just walked all the way, cheese. And then later on, I discovered on the same album there was a little bit about Muhammad Ali that had a whole other level of understanding about our society. Cheese was just bait.
I used to be this guy, or maybe this guy used to be me. I don't know. We were each other at one time. It wasn't long ago. I liked him, you know. He was really good. He was funny, and I had a lot of fun with him. He did some nice things for me, but it was like there was nothing behind him, you know. He was kind of just superficial, just the surface. It was all characters. I wasn't in there. I found out I wasn't in my own act after a while, and here I'd been doing it for 5 years. It was all characters. It was all other people that I remembered from my life, and composites of people.
People like this lady here, Congolia Breckenridge, a marvelous contestant on a quiz show. Pick a door. Oh, let me see. Monty. Oh, how many? What are the doors?
1, 2, and 3.
Oh, wow. What was that again?
1, 2, and 3.
Okay, 3. You what? Wait, 1. No, hold on. I didn't go yet.
Now that, if nothing else, is proof of the theory of evolution. George Carlin's transformation was amazing, and one of the reasons that I'm here today is I was fortunate enough to be asked to host 40 years in comedy, A Night with George Carlin. Now, the idea was that we were going to take this amazing comedian who'd been doing comedy for 40 years and had 2 heart attacks, and we were going to send him to Aspen, Colorado, the highest point in America where there's very little oxygen. And then we were going to bring in a heavy smoker from New York to interview him. So my job was to interview George, and I got the chance to get to know him a little bit beforehand. I flew out to California to meet him and to sit down with him and to talk with him. And I think that's where I learned the lesson about George Carlin and what he meant to comedy and what he was like as an artist. I didn't know what to expect. I went over to his office on Brentwood, and I sort of had this idea that I was going to watch the master create. You know, we were going to go there, and he'd be like, hey, man, let's go out to the desert. I'm going to take some peyote. I'm going to get in a yurt, and it's going to come to me. And I walked into his office, and it's just a computer and a desk. And this incredibly anti-establishment mind punched in every day and sat and worked. He cared enough about his comedy and about what he was doing that every day he punched the clock. This was a blue-collar guy. That was the main message that I took from him. So when we went out to Aspen, I was so excited. It was the Wheeler Opera House. About 4 stories up was where the stage was, so George and I both had our little oxygen tanks. They gave us both oxygen tanks. And so when I finally caught up to George on the 4th floor, he was just pacing back and forth, going over this routine that he had written about advertising. It was 3 minutes of just advertising phrases, just one after the other, over and over again. And he was just going back and forth, just rehearsing it. 40 years in comedy, and he was still choreographing and presenting it and drafting it and perfecting it. And it was the most inspiring thing I think I'd ever seen from a comedian. And I was trying to kind of talk to him right beforehand, and I said, hey man, no oxygen up here. I can't believe they built a city. And he just leaned in and he goes, I'm going to tell you something. rich ass can survive anywhere. This is a little bit from the interview. When you were a kid growing up, you wanted to be Danny Kaye and Bob Hope. So how do you think this thing is working out so far, looking back?
Well, I knew I wanted to stand up and, and be silly and have people say, isn't he cute? Isn't he cute and clever? And that's all it was a reward, a psychic reward, when you're a kid and you find out that you can get the attention of adults and approval and a little bit of respect, and you just hunger for it, you keep going back for it. And I have, fortunately, genetic, my little toolkit, my genetic toolkit I was given included a mother and father who were very funny people, could do accents and dialects and tell funny stories about what happened on the bus that morning and have a punchline. So you don't lick it off the rocks, they say in Ireland. So I thank my grandmother's milkman, actually, which might have been. You never know where these things go.
No, you can never tell. It's interesting, as I watch you now and through all the years of listening to your albums and things, your fascination with language is so apparent. Watching you work is almost like watching a musician. The way you weave words and use language for emphasis and all that. Was that always a fascination for you, even as a kid?
Well, to go backwards with the question, don't forget what we do is oratory. It's rhetoric. It's not just comedy, it's a form of rhetoric. And with rhetoric, you look and you listen for rhythms. You look for ways to sing at the same time you're talking and to go da-da-dun, 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 dun-dun, and dun, da-dun, dun, 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 da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. And it's just natural. My mother was very kind of controlling, wanted to control my life, and was heartbroken when I began with the dirty language and the awful stuff he says about business. She was an advertising executive secretary, loved the business world, thought it was just the finest thing that ever happened. And so when I went in that direction at first, very opposed, until one day we lived on the same street that I grew up, that I went to school in. I went to school on the same block I lived on, something like that. Corpus Christi School, and the nuns were great. It wasn't a typical Catholic school. It was an experimental progressive school that didn't have grades, didn't have any sort of corporal punishment. It was just very, very wonderful school. And the nuns, she would see the nuns in the street and they would say, oh, we saw George on the Tonight Show. And she, being a bit of an actress, she would say, oh, it's the awful language, sister, the awful language. And one of them said to her, no, you don't understand. He's using it for other purposes. He's not just doing it for that. It's kind of like part of what he does. Don't you understand? It's this and that and so forth. So she said, oh. And from that day on, she was okay with it because the church had approved it.
So glad I started dyeing my hair gray. Making myself look tired. It's really smart of me. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Mark Twain Prize winner, the amazing Lily Tomlin.